All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments for June 20th, 2024. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Lavanino. For the roll call, Director Williams. I guess you should make sure they can hear us. Martha, can you hear us?
They're not even there.
Just saying we have this all ironed out. Martha, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Did Director Williams step back? Oh, there he is. I'm doing roll call. Director Williams.
Here.
Hartman.
Here.
Capps. Nelson.
Here.
Perotti.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
Osborne.
Here.
Julian.
Here.
Patino.
Here.
Infanti.
Here.
King. And Chair Lavanino.
I'm here.
You all
Rouse
said,
is there.
yeah, Rouse
Yeah.
said yes.
You got called. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time is a time we have set aside for public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak on public comment?
Chair Lavanino, we have no present people for public comment in Santa Maria or anyone online. Is there anybody in Santa Barbara?
We have no one requesting public comment in Santa Barbara.
All right, that takes us to item number 4, which is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any members of the public that have pulled any items off of consent?
Chair Lavanino, we have no request for public comment on any consent items.
Okay, does any members of the board, either in Santa Maria or Santa Barbara, like to withdraw any items for consent for consideration?
I'd like to draw R.
R, okay. Anybody in Santa Barbara? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the balance of the administrative agenda except for R?
Hartman so moves.
Moved by Director Hartman,
Infanti, second.
second by Director Infanti. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Director Williams? Director Williams?
Aye.
Capps? Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Osborne?
Aye.
Infanti?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
King?
Aye.
King.
Oh.
I thought,
I'm always out.
How's Buellton going?
voice over there. I'm sorry. Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Lavanino.
Aye.
Motion passes 11-0.
All right. We've had item R pulled by Director Nelson. Madam Clerk, can you please read R into the record?
Thank you. Item 4R, Santa Maria Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, Ridge Ranch Project. Acting as a Airport Land Use Commission, adopt findings for the Ridge Ranch Project and determine that the project is consistent with the Santa Maria Airport Land Use Capability Plan. I can't speak.
Is that the complete read-in? We're good?
sorry.
Okay. Director Nelson?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Which of the Richard Ranch projects is this? My understanding is they have about 3 different versions out right now between their proposed annexation project and their pre-zoning. They also have a builder's remedy project in the county, and they also have requesting a development agreement with the county for another project on top of that. So I guess I'm just curious on which of the 3 projects that they're out there trying to move forward with is this one? And how would it potentially impact those other 2?
Good morning. Thank you for the question, Director Nelson, through the chair. So this, I understand the question. So this is a project that is proposing an annexation through the city of Santa Maria. And so there's currently, my understanding is there's currently an EIR that's been prepared for the city of Santa Maria. And they requested that be referred to us and to this commission, the Airport Land Use Commission, for a determination of consistency with the Santa Maria Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan.
So that would,
And so if you take a look at our analysis that we did, there's a project description in there that describes the project. There's a shopping center to the north of UVP and some residential to the south.
so with an annexation, that's a pre-zone, right? So there's no actual requirement that that zoning stay there after the annexation, right? It could be something else after the fact.
That's right. So yeah, what's contained right now in the project descriptions is a conceptual project.
So this is a conceptual compatibility.
Yeah, what we did was we looked at what the zoning would be in the city of Santa Maria's general plan. Yeah,
So this was
So-
actually contemplated in the city of Santa Maria's general plan?
yeah,
I'm not sure if it's actually.
because it was a proposal to annex into the city.
No,
of
I
Santa
understand
Maria.
this is but this is an applicant-driven annexation, not a city of Santa Maria-driven annexation. So I don't believe that this property is actually in the zonings here are actually in the general plan. These are just what's proposed by the applicant.
It's
So,
what's proposed by the applicant, and I'll clarify that it was referred to us by the city of Santa Maria.
by city staff, right? Their
Yes.
council hasn't taken any action on this project, right?
Right. Say again?
Their council has not taken any action on this project?
No.
So this is
Not yet.
just an applicant coming through to the city of Santa Maria, going through a process with them, staff saying to complete the IR, we need to check in with SBCAG and make sure that the EIR that it's proposed right now for the pre-zoning, which is not, doesn't necessarily lock anything in, it's conceptual.
Correct.
And so this is just a conceptual compatibility. So in the future, when they lock that down, whenever it does get zoned, whatever it is, then it'd come back through again to make sure it was then at that time compatible.
Yeah, the action that we're asking you to determine today is if the cities, if the zoning is consistent with the Santa Maria Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the conceptual zoning, as far as staff is concerned, is consistent.
Yes. That's our
Okay,
recommendation.
all right.
Yeah.
And so if they went back through another process and changed something, that would come back to us?
Yes.
If they went back through the county, that also come back to us again through another document in the future?
Yes, and I'll make the point to you is that I think a couple of months ago, that the county housing element, there was a key site 26, and we had a similar recommendation at this site where we said that it was consistent with the Santa Maria Airport Land Use Compatibility
For where
Plan
the.
as well.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So it's specific to the conceptual piece in the future. I just want to make sure for the record, it would come back to if zoning
Yes.
changed, or if the
Yes.
project came back through for maybe a development agreement or some other kind of project in the county, or a builder's remedy project, because my understanding right now is they're also processing a builder's remedy application for that piece. Have we got a chance to look at that?
I'll defer to Susan or
'Cause-
to Mike on the builder's remedy.
One thing I want to clarify, and if the city, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the city of Santa Maria's general plan is amended to be consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan, then they don't have to come back if we've made that determination.
Sure.
So once they do that, we're in the in-between stage right now because we adopted the airport land use compatibility plan and the cities are updating their plans to be consistent. So that's why you're seeing these compatibility determinations. So it's when those things, when the general plan is not consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan that you see this. So it may not come back if the general plan is amended to be consistent.
It's your right there. As Andrew mentioned, a couple months ago, the board approved the consistency determination for the county's zoning
Yeah.
update for the county's general or comprehensive plan. So if the county moves forward with a project, a developer going through the county, and their project is consistent with the county's zoning, then it would not need to come back. If it is not consistent and requires a general plan amendment or some change compared to what we analyzed, then it would come back. So essentially, this is an individual project that we're looking at. It's interesting as we looked at it 2 months ago for the county. So long as, or whenever Santa Maria completes its general plan, that general plan will come for a consistency determination. And if that project is in there, that would be included in that action then.
Okay, I understand. I understand, again, this Richard Ranch is also has an application in with the county for a built-as remedy project on
Yes,
this site.
It was actually interesting when we got this because we just did it for the county and now we're doing it for Santa Maria.
Well, then I think there's now a third option, right, with the builder's remedy, because
Well, we
the
haven't
builder's
got that
remedy
one yet.
project was not what you guys reviewed, my understanding at that.
Yeah, it was the county's zoning amendments.
Right, so again, the reason, sorry guys, everybody for this, is there's just a lot of confusion going on out there, and, you know, as a supervisor and a director, is, you know, me being confused, I can imagine how the public feels as well as we try to get through this process here. So I just want to again, be specific that this compatibility is only to the city's process at this time?
Yes, this is through the city's process.
Okay, great. So, and what happens if we didn't approve this? What would be the
So
recourse?
there's 2 options. So if the board would disagree with staff's conclusion that it's compatible and you found it incompatible, then if the city wanted to move forward with, still wanted to move forward with it, and this is not getting into the annexation issue, but just to, hypothetically, if it was already within the city's boundaries and the board found the project inconsistent, the city council can override the decision and move forward anyhow.
Great.
Take no action and.
That approves it.
And it,
It approves it.
yeah, if you take no action, it'll just be by default
If the city of Santa Maria approves it?
No.
No,
If this
here.
board does not take an action, then we have 60 days to approve it or not. If we don't, they can continue on without our approval.
So you'd have to, if you wanted to kill it, it would have to be you found it inconsistent.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for spending the time on this for me. I was a little wanted to make sure I actually got on the record what we were looking at here, because I think there's a lot of people that have eyes on this project, and they've got 3 different projects approved or in a process right now for this property. So just trying to make sure I nail down which one we're talking about here today. Personally, I'm just going to abstain on this. I think that we're going through 3 different processes, and it's a little confusing. So I want to make sure I'm clear on my constituents that I'm not preloaded in one direction or another. So I'm personally going to abstain. I understand that if we don't move forward, that it's going to be by default approved as well. And I don't object to any of my colleagues moving along with this as well. I just, like I said, I'm going to abstain for my own personal purposes. Thank you.
There's public comment.
Do we have any public comment on this matter?
Yes, we have one comment. Are you ready? Do you want to speak, Lori?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Public comment withdrawn.
Hartman moves staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Hartman, a second by Williams. Roll call, please.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Capps, Hartman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Abstain?
Osborne,
Yes.
Infante,
Aye.
Julian,
Aye.
King,
Abstain.
Patino. Aye. Perotti,
Aye.
Clark. Director Clark,
Aye. He said
Rouse?
aye.
Aye.
and Chair Lavanino.
Aye.
Motion passes 10-0-2.
Okay, that takes care of the administrative agenda. That takes us to our review and discussion and action items. Madam Clerk, can you please read 5A into the record?
Certainly. 5A, approval of final project list for SBCAG Regional Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program application. 5A1, receive a presentation on the Transit and Intercity Capital Program. 5A2, approve the final project list and submittal of the TIRCIP application to the California State Transportation Agency.
morning.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and Director Sarkis Kachek with the SBCAG. We have a slide deck for you that was included as a staff report. Was included with the staff report as an attachment. So we'll bring that up. Thank you. Next slide, please. So today we have some exciting news on collaboration that we've been doing in our county with local partners for the past few months regarding pursuit of state discretionary funding to help fund local and regional projects. So today is an action item requesting approval by your board for submittal of the application. Next slide, please. So a few months ago, the state provided our region and regions across the state with one-time funding called through Senate Bill 125 for transit and rail projects. Our region received a share of that $5.3 billion. It was about 1% for our county at $53 million. So this is a really big infusion of funding that SBCAG and partners across the state advocated for and was included in the state budget. With that funding, staff presented the concept of taking 10% off the top as a match for a forthcoming competitive application. So thanks to your board for that support. And then we have that funding available as a match. And then we've also been working with our local partners on their project list and then identifying additional match, which we'll go over in a second. Next slide, please. So the program that we're seeking funding for is a state competitive program that's administered by the California State Transportation Agency. And so the funding is available annually, and it's funding to help fund transit and rail projects that increase ridership and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is a funding program that our region has been successful with before. And so what we wanted to do was identify projects from our region with that matching funding and pursue that funding. There's going to be approximately $800 million available this cycle. And so that's funding that's available statewide. And we are going to be, with your board's approval today, we will then complete the application and then submit it by July 23rd. The state will then review the applications over the next few months, and we'll know on October 23rd. One thing that we wanted to note is that while we've been successful with this program before, if we are not successful, then we will come back to your board and look at how we would distribute that $5.3 million that the board approved before. We have a framework in place that we would just distribute that funding the same way that we did for the balance of the $53 million. So this is a photo of the Goleta train depot that was a successful project in the prior cycle. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Maya Kulkarni of the programming team. I just did want to say one thing. I wanted to thank Maya for her leadership in coordinating with our partners. This is the first time that we've submitted an application of this kind before, and so she's been working with our partners diligently on this. So thank you.
Good morning, directors. Maya Kulkarni from programming. And I'm just going to give a summary of all the projects. So we're submitting a total of 9 projects, and it's going to be a $63 million ask. It's broken down into, we have electrification projects, some facility improvements, transformative projects, as well as bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then I also wanted to note that we also have a $63 million match as well. That's a 1-to-1 match almost, so that'll make us more competitive for the funding. Next slide, please. So we're gonna apply for electric buses. It's gonna be a total of 23 buses between City of Lompoc Transit, Clean Air Express, and Santa Barbara MTD. And it's going to be a total of $16.7 million ask. Next slide, please. And here's an example. On the left is an MTD electric bus, and on the right is a Clean Air Express electric bus. Next slide. So to accompany the electric buses, we're also going to have some transit facility improvements. And so that'll add some solar, some battery storage, as well as charging infrastructure, among other improvements as well. And that'll help with our with our transition to electric buses. So it'll help us continue to have a good operation for the whole system. Next slide, please. And so here's an example. Santa Maria Transit Center is on the right. That's the current one. And then on the left is a rendering of what we would be applying for. So then we also have some transformative projects. We have a countywide contactless integrated fare system, and that will allow for one payment system across all of the transit systems in the county, which will be super helpful, especially when we're transferring from one system to another. And then it also allows for contactless payment, so you can just pay with your credit card or with your phone right on the bus itself. And then also we have Santa Maria Transit will be implementing a bus rapid transit system along Broadway, which is their most congested corridor. So hopefully this will be implemented and will help relieve that congestion. Next slide, please. And then the last project is the Cabrillo Boulevard Bike and Pedestrian Project. This will replace the undercrossing and allow for bike and pedestrian improvements underneath that. And then we're also applying for SB1 funding, and this project is included in that ask as well. And then next slide, oh, we have a picture. That's a rendering of what the undercrossing will look like. So with the SB 125 funding, like Sarkis mentioned before, if we do get funded from TIRSIP, we'll be deciding how to distribute that $5.3 million amongst the awarded projects. And then if we don't get that funding, we'll come back to TTAC as well as your board to decide how to distribute it. We do have, like Sarkis said, the LC top framework that we've been using, so that's one option, but we can consider other options as well. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and hopefully we won't have to get there. And then, so for next steps, we'll be submitting the application July 23rd, and then we'll hear back in end of October. So once we hear back, we'll give a update to TTAC as well as the board in November, and then we can decide on the SB 125 match funding as well. And then I just wanted to thank our local partners. It's a huge application, and we have a lot of people working on it. So I want to thank everybody for their help with putting together this big application. And I think that's all I have. So we have any questions, we can take them.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this matter?
Oh, yeah.
Chair Levine, we have no request for public comment in Santa Maria.
I'll open it up to the board for questions, or I'll ask one. Just is there? We have a lot of projects that we have listed out. Do we have a ranking system, or is it if we get what are we asking for? 63 million. If we get 30 million, we're going to take that back to TTAC and then bring it back through the system, or?
So we have to not prioritize, but scale the projects as well. So that's something that we have to include in our narrative.
Okay.
So if we get a certain amount of funding, then how can we scale our projects themselves? And then also I think the way they do it, it's not we get the funding and then we decide how to distribute it. It's based on projects. So the projects that are going to do better are the ones that, or that are likely going to get funded are the ones that, reduce greenhouse gases.
Okay.
And improve transit, yeah.
Okay.
And
So
Sarkis
yeah.
probably has
Sorry,
something
just to add on. So might answer that, but the state's ultimately going to be deciding on which projects they feel like are the best performing and meet the goals of the program. So they're going to go through each one and look at the benefits analysis and all that, and then they're going to let us know on which projects that they selected.
Right. So I'm just curious, we have a lot of projects, and is it, if you get, I mean, they're not going to do a half, they're not going to just give us a certain amount of money, it's by project. So
Correct.
they're either funding it entirely with our match, or that one's not getting included.
If they, since we're providing a menu of
Right.
projects, the one hypothetical is that they say, well, we're going to give you, we'll fund these two at $30 million.
Got it.
And then the
Okay.
rest did not get funded.
Got it.
Or they could do a different approach, but that's more the former's the likely approach.
Okay, perfect. Anything from Santa Barbara? Okay.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes.
I don't want to let it go unnoticed. I mean, this is huge, and
Yeah.
should and would truly lead to some transformative changes. And so I just because there isn't controversy over it, I don't want to let it slide without comment.
Okay. So we have, need a motion for 1 and 2. We're approving the final project list here. So
Hartman moves.
Hartman moves.
I'll second.
Was that Williams? Yes. Okay. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Director Williams.
Aye.
Capps.
Aye.
Hartman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye.
Infante.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Patino. Aye. Perotti.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Rouse.
Aye.
And Chair Labanino.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
Okay, that takes us to item 5B. Madam Clerk, can you read that into the record, please?
Thank you. Item 5B, Connected 2050 Sustainable Community Strategy Scenario Selection. Review sustainable community strategy scenario alternatives, can't even speak right, alternatives, and direct staff on the scenario to be used as the foundation for updating the Connected 2050 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainability Community Strategy. There you go.
All right.
All right, Mr. Becker.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Directors. Mike Becker, and I'm going to present a very similar item to if you were at one of the sub-regional meetings, or if or both of them. It's going to be a very, very similar presentation. If you weren't at one of the sub-regionals, feel free to ask questions at any time. So we have a slide deck also attached to the staff report, and I'm going to walk you through it. Next slide, please. So exactly what Terry had just said is what we're asking for. We're asking for you to select the sustainable community strategy scenario that we will build the regional transportation plan around. And next slide. So before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to highlight our process of where we are and where we've been. So the green dot in the middle of the screen is where we are. Today, we're asking you to select a scenario, and after that, I say that we have all the ingredients to make a regional transportation plan, and we'll be turning to drafting the plan as well as conducting the required environmental review. That will lead into 2 public hearings that the state law requires us to conduct as we lead up towards adoption, and those are scheduled to occur during your June and August 2025 meetings, with plan adoption also in August 2025. Through this process, we've had a public process. Most recently, we conducted 2 public workshops to get input on the scenario, and I'll share some of the results of that as we go forward. Next slide. Okay, so just in general, the presentation, we're going to talk about what's a regional transportation plan, what's a sustainable community strategy, what is the public outreach that we conducted, and what's the result of that, and then finally we'll get into the scenarios and see which one the board prefers or which way we want to go. Next slide. All right. So quickly on, just in general, a regional transportation plan. It's kind of the document that guides the projects that the region supports and the policies, the goals, and so forth. It's we don't have a general plan. We have a regional transportation plan. It kind of serves that purpose. It's the guiding document for the agency. It's a requirement of both state and federal law. However, if you go to other states, it would be a requirement of federal law, but it's also in California, it's also state law. We have to update this plan every 4 years. So the last plan was adopted in August 2021. We're looking to come back in August 2025 to adopt the plan that we're currently working on, and we'll be back 4 years later. And with that, every other regional transportation plan is tied to a regional housing needs allocation process. This one is not, so when we come back in 2029, we'll also be doing RENA at the same time. As we do these plans, ultimately it's the list of projects that are included within the plan that are really the backbone. It shows how, as a region, we intend to invest in the transportation network over time. We have to be fiscally constrained in that, and that means that we can only say that we're going to deliver projects that we reasonably expect to be able to afford. So one step in the process is we kind of forecast our transportation revenues out to 2050, and at this point, basically every project's an estimate, but you make sure that there's room in the budget to advance what we're looking to advance. And we're also required to look at least 20 years. This plan we're seeking will look at 25 years. The last plan, it was 29 years because we adopted in 2021 and looked out to 2050. The next one, we'll decide whether we go to 2060 or stay with 2050. Next slide. Okay, so that's the regional transportation plan side. Until 2006, that was what it was. It was a regional transportation plan. In 2006, the state passed Assembly Bill 32 and renewed it in 2016 with the Senate Bill 32, but that was the Global Warming Solutions Act. And that said, across all sectors, California is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. To implement one aspect of that, the state passed Senate Bill 375 in 2008. And I call that one piece of the pie because it charges the metropolitan planning organizations, such as SBCAG, with addressing greenhouse gas emissions from light-duty vehicles. So that's the piece of the pie that we're focused on. AB 32 is much broader across all sectors. Our focus is limited to greenhouse gas emissions from light-duty vehicles. Next slide. So the Senate Bill 375 charges the California Air Resources Board with setting targets for each of the 18 regions within California. SBCAG's current greenhouse gas reduction target is 17% below 2005 levels by 2035. It also included a 2000 target year. However, we are well beyond that, so our focus is just on the 2035 target. There's a bill that's being debated in the state legislature right now that could potentially extend this CARB's authority for this out to 2050, but at this point in time, we're just focused on 2035 for the greenhouse gas emissions. And how we do that, so the Sustainable Community Strategy said that you have to consider land use development patterns in addition to transportation investment to see how those two work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So what can we do? What are the tools that we use to get there? Ultimately, we have the transportation projects. We could focus on transportation projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The big one in our region is the land use development patterns. And the biggest tool there is the RENA process. And that's where in the sixth cycle of RENA, the board approved an allocation that about 60% of the allocation to the South County, 40% to the North County, and that was matching the jobs level at the time. So it was to essentially stop the bleeding of the jobs housing imbalance and by doing so, you also have the ability to reduce the per capita greenhouse gas emissions. Senate Bill 375 also offers some CEQA streamlining. It's primarily related to residential development around transit. And it's important to note, and Senate Bill 375 explicitly states this in the text of the bill, that there's no requirement of consistency between local general plans and the sustainable community strategy. So whatever this board approves today, it doesn't mean that when you go back to your local agency that they have to listen to what we do. And if the board, when we come to 2025, when we're looking to adopt the plan, if we cannot adopt a plan that has a sustainable community strategy that satisfies the greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, we're required to prepare what's called an alternative planning strategy. And that means we just demonstrate how in theory, we could meet the greenhouse gas emissions if we weren't physically constrained, and if it's more of an exercise of what we could possibly do rather than potentially what we would do. However, with that no requirement of consistency, there's probably actually in reality very little difference between a sustainable community strategy and an alternative planning strategy, with the exception of the alternative planning strategy is not fiscally constrained. So next slide, please. Okay. So this is, in 2021, the board adopted Connect to 2050, which included a sustainable community strategy. And it focused, really, the way that it addresses the greenhouse gas emissions is by focusing on the jobs, housing, and balance. And really what it tries to do is, one of the tools in our toolbox is the RENA process, so it focuses residential development where jobs are. SBCAG doesn't have a tool for economic development, but it also, we would want to promote economic development where that jobs housing balance is not as significant. So economic development in North County, residential development in South County to address the jobs housing imbalance. And I will say we first adopted a sustainable community strategy in 2013, a second one in 2017, the third one was in 2021. All three of those past ones had the same sustainable community strategy, which I'll get into in a minute. But so in addition to the larger, trying to make trips shorter by addressing the jobs housing imbalance, it also promotes development in areas that are location efficient, being an area where not every trip needs to be driving alone. And we also have in the planning lingo or off-model strategies, which include remote work. We've seen through the pandemic a pretty big growth in remote work. In our region, we found it to be about 15%. Also, the region supports van pools and electric vehicle infrastructure. However, that one's tricky because that's another piece of the pie that the state deals with that's not in our purview. However, any local funds that are used to support electric vehicle infrastructure can be credited towards our sustainable community strategy. But anything that comes from the state or the federal government is a different piece of the pie that is being counted by somebody else. And we also looked at the projects that are within the regional transportation plan, and about 90% of all spending is just purely to maintain the existing transportation system. That's the maintenance funds. And we also, the region has been consistent in focusing on implementing Measure A, the lane and the train, and all the other named projects, as well as the local priorities. So that's essentially what the sustainable community strategy is. Continue to focus on implementing Measure A in those projects. Consistent with the RENA process, focus residential development in South County, promote economic development in North County, and trying to encourage development that's location efficient. And I will say some of this stuff is happening irregardless of this plan. It's kind of the contemporary way of planning. And next slide. Okay, we did a public process. In November of 2023, we went to the Joint Technical Advisory Committee, which is the committee that's jointly TTAC, which is transportation, and TPAC, which is planning or community development. They meet together as JTAC. And JTAC reviewed and recommended approval of a public participation plan for this process. The board, in turn, approved that plan in November 2023. And it identified how we would carry out the public process. We said that we would do it in 3 phases. The first phase was stakeholder outreach and engagement, and that occurred in February of this year. And that was focused on government agencies, advocacy groups, and so forth, not necessarily just pure members of the public. It was kind of organizations and groups. So we got through that in February, and then we said that we would do 2 public workshops. We conducted those in May. The first one was in person, held in the city of Solvang. We were looking for a central location within the county. And then we had a virtual one, which was better attended. And so that is where we are. We finished those 2, and that phase 2 of the public process was really to get input from members of the public on the scenario selection. And I previously mentioned in June and August of 2025, we'll be coming back to the board with public hearings. Next slide, please. Okay, so I did cut some of these from the sub-regional presentation, but just highlighting some of the information that we shared at the public process. And early in, as we were starting to develop this plan, we looked at what are our available revenues out to 2050. So we had to forecast all the different funding sources, include some inflationary factors and so forth to determine what do we expect to receive as a region to be able to invest in transportation. And we found that number to be about $7.4 billion, and it falls into a variety of sources with Measure A, and then we have state and federal sources that are different colors of money. Some are focused on streets and highways, some are focused on transit, and some are focused on active transportation or bicycle and pedestrian. And we had, or I just need to say that these lines are blurry. There are plenty of streets and highways projects that provide benefit for transit or provide benefit for people on bicycles or walking. If you look at the pie chart on the bottom, you could kind of see the breakdown of how that funding is. Again, it's a very blurry line, so it's really, hindsight is the only way that you can truly create an accurate one, and we're forecasting way out into the future. So again, take it with a grain of salt. Next slide, please. Okay, now we get into the scenarios. In this cycle, we presented 3 scenarios. The first one, we previously called this business as usual, but we changed the name of it to 2005-2019 Growth Patterns to 2050, which basically just says, if we continue to grow as we have been, what's the result into the future? So it's not consistent with the RENA process. It just says, we look at how we have grown and just extrapolate that into the future. And what we found is the vast majority of the population growth would occur in the North County, and that would further exacerbate the jobs housing imbalance potentially. And on the transportation side, we continued with the transportation projects that we have supported in the past, which include Measure A as well as the local priorities. The second one is the transit-oriented development, infill development scenario. This is the scenario that was selected in 2013, 2017, 2021. And this is essentially, assumes that the RENA process, the 6-cycle RENA, those allocations were, development occurred along the same lines and continued into the future, the 2050. And also that the new development is transportation efficient. And that would essentially kind of keep our in-commuting or the long-distance commuting as it is without growth into the future. And also on the transportation side, same thing as the prior. We continue to focus on the projects within Measure A and the local priorities and the regional priorities. So everything I said about that scenario is the same for the third scenario. However, we wanted to have at least 2 scenarios that would satisfy the greenhouse gas emissions. And so we said, what is really in play is Measure A expires in 2040. So it's, however, we assume that there's a continuation of that funding to 2050 or beyond. So that was really kind of the only screw that can be turned was how is that funding allocated in a post-2040 environment. So we went from the funding breakdowns that are included within Measure A, which is currently about 58% of the money is passed through to local agencies for local priorities and maintenance. Roughly 22% falls into the name project categories, the major regional investments. About 17% is passed through to transit, and the bicycle and pedestrian programs represent about 3% of Measure A. So so we went to another extreme with the third scenario. We said we'll slightly increase what's passed through to the local agencies. We won't have name projects per se in this third scenario. However, we'll increase the share that is going to support transit from 17 to 25%, and would invest in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure from 3% to 15%. And as we sought public input on this, we also gave the public the ability to adjust these percentages. So there's an option of a hybrid somewhere between the second and third scenario. And I'll get into that in a second. Next slide. Okay, so we presented these to the public, and we had a virtual or an online survey that the members of the public could participate in to highlight what scenario they supported. And Supervisor Nelson, I put on the top of the screen there the breakdown of where they came from. We did ask for zip codes, so I went through and summarized the zip codes, and about 21% were North County respondents, 77 South County. We had a few out of region. I think that was 1 in San Luis Obispo and 2 in Ventura. So we said, what is the preferred scenario? And you can see where that landed. About 64% chose that alternative transportation emphasis scenario. 22% for the existing scenario that we have, the transit-oriented development, infill development scenario. And then I previously mentioned that they also had the ability to change that spending, or the spending by category of a future measure. And again, this is all broad-based at this point. We have, there's going to be several regional transportation plans that are adopted before we get to this point. There's going to be many, many more discussions. So today and this process is kind of the just the first touches on what's a future measure potentially look like. So we have on the lower table, we could have the top row is current, which is the spending by category for Measure A. Again, the first one that's maintenance is what's passed through to local agencies. Major projects are the name projects, and then you have your transit support and bicycle pedestrian programs. So the top line that's labeled current is Measure A. The survey respondents, so that's people who took the survey and had the ability to adjust these. Those are the percentages that they came up with. I will say that the tool that we used enabled people to, they could essentially do 100, 100, 100, 100. It's not going to stop them from going over 100%. So I had to factor these to make them sum to 100. And then the scenario example, which is that third scenario, that's what was presented. So you can see that the public did still have appetite for major regional or name projects. They slightly took down the transit, but they increased the bike ped, and the biggest decline was the amount of funding that's passed through to maintenance. So again, Measure A, what the survey said and what we presented. So next slide. Okay, so I think this one was important. We received a comment during or prior to one of the workshops, and we wanted to show what is compatible with the sustainable community strategy. And this is for the 2 transit-oriented development infill development scenarios. I failed to mention that the growth patterns to 2050 scenario would not satisfy the greenhouse gas reductions. So if the board chose to go with that direction, we would be preparing an alternative planning strategy. But I'd also say that there's 18 metropolitan planning organizations in the state of California, and every single one of them has a sustainable community strategy and non-alternative planning strategy. On the land use side, what's compatible with the sustainable community strategy? Anything that's consistent with RENA. We want to be internally consistent, so we have RENA allocations if you're building within that, which I think in general, it's most jurisdictions don't achieve the RENA allocation at the end of the day. Perhaps they do for certain categories, but not all. Any job-producing development in northern Santa Barbara County to help focus the other side of the jobs housing imbalance. Any new development that satisfies Senate Bill 743 and mitigates its vehicle miles travel impact would be consistent. And that's the one where I think as we grow over time, we are going to start to run into pressures where we need to grow out in addition to growing up. And so we're just saying if we are going to grow out, that if we're mitigating the VMT, then that works too. And then any project that is consistent with Senate Bill 730 or 375 CEQA provisions. On the transportation side, what would be consistent is any project that we list in the regional transportation plan, projects that kind of by their nature focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is transit, van poles, rail, and bike ped. Again, similar to the land use side, any project that can mitigate its VMT impact, and projects that focus on EV or hydrogen or other low carbon fuels, as well as any project related to just maintaining the system. So that's what's compatible. Next slide. Okay, and this is kind of the end of my presentation, but what we're asking you to do is to direct us to build the regional transportation plan around one of these three scenarios or a hybrid version of them. The scenarios are listed on the right. We had the three scenarios, and the Joint Technical Advisory Committee reviewed these and made a recommendation. We did have, and they recommended the third scenario, the alternative transportation emphasis scenario. And I will note that there was dissensions with that. It was not a unanimous recommendation. Members from the city of Santa Maria and the city of Lompoc dissented, and we asked them why. And the city of Santa Maria just stated that as we continue to grow, we have to expect that there will be demands for major projects going forward, and we couldn't support no major regional projects. And the member from the city of Lompoc agreed. And there's also a hybrid option. I put this table back on there so we can see what the survey respondents said, what the example was, as well as what Measure A is. So again, the second scenario, transit-oriented development, infill development, is the one that has been previously selected, and that assumes the Measure A division of revenue going forward through at least 2050. The survey respondents gave a different, for the alternative transportation, you could see what they were, and then despite the fact that the third one, or the alternative transportation emphasis, had a vast majority of public support. The public did say they did have the ability, and many did change the funding breakdown to include major regional projects. I'm happy to take any questions.
Supervisor Hartman.
What is the practical on-the-ground impact of this exercise? And did the assumptions we made last time have any practical effect? And if they didn't, do you anticipate that it will in the future?
Good question, Director Hartman. I think in our region, we've found through this process that really the only way that we're ever going to address the greenhouse gas emissions reductions called for through Senate Bill 375 is by jobs housing imbalance. That there's no transit project that's going to solve this. It's really about there's a lot of people, and to get in for average per capita trip to become shorter is the way that we do it. And the way that happens is by closing the gap between where people live and where they work. So that's why the RENA process ended up the way it did. And I think
So does this help drive the RENA allocation?
they're certainly related. So in the past, when we adopted a 2021 plan, that was the first time that the Sustainable Community Strategy and RENA were consistent. We were calling for 60% on one document and 60% on another document of residential development to south. Prior to that, the Sustainable Community Strategy still focused on that. However, the RENA process was not consistent with that. I think it was 51 or 52% of new development in South County and 48, 49 in North County. So I think through this process, we at least recognize how we can address the greenhouse gas emissions. And that enables us to do things such as present to the board RENA allocation that probably gives a lot of you heartburn, but it
Some of us.
yeah, it certainly influenced it. I think if we continue on this path and say that yes, we want to support the state law to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, RENA is the biggest tool that we have in our toolbox.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Labanino. Just make sure I also understand what I heard from you, that this isn't a binding document. This doesn't necessarily require SBCAG to force funding into these formulas in the future. And staff isn't going to say, hey, we can't move forward because it doesn't fit the formula if there's a major project that we want to support?
No. I will say, if we don't have an adopted sustainable community strategy, we wouldn't be eligible, or we would be penalized for some grant funds. So if we want to advance a major regional project, it would need to have an adopted.
Sure. Well, and that's what I actually, I like about the first scenario. We're not bound, but we're still recognizing that we're going to be doing major projects. Because I think that's really important. I think it's really hard for some of us in the North County to say no more regional projects after Measure A is done, because that's what this time frame has to deal with. And after we spend $1 billion down the South Coast, then we're going to be done with major projects for the next generation is really untenable, and probably means the doom to any future tax measure after Measure A. So you're going to need to have countywide support for that. And I think that the popular support will be for something that will include major projects. And I think that major projects are really economic drivers. We're talking about job, housing, and balance, but I think something that's an impediment to economic development is often some of these infrastructure constraints that exist. I just think about in the city of Santa Maria, there at Mahoney and Betaravia, and the traffic issue there, how that has not allowed that area to develop the way that it was supposed to. And you just think about Union Valley Parkway, that's only halfway done. So all those types of things that eventually would help drive economic development throughout the valley. We want to see those, and I'm sure there's a laundry list of those projects in Lompoc, whether it's the bridge across Central Avenue, right? That would be a huge boom to the community. I'm sure Guadalupe, as they continue to grow, are going to be there's probably projects that they haven't even imagined yet, right? That we want to make sure that we're open to. And so again, that's why I really hope that this board adopts a scenario that includes major projects. I know there might be a temptation to do a hybrid or in between, but I think what you have right here is fairly measured. And again, since we don't necessarily have to stick to it to the letter, then I think instead of trying to go send staff back with to do a lot more work, we should probably just adopt one of these today so that we can kind of move on to other projects. So thank you for that. I do want to just point out that, something you kind of said is that we kind of do housing, but we don't do economic development. And I really think that's something we all should take a lot more seriously, because I do think we have opportunities to influence those decisions. And I think we should, do that. And it's not just because of the job, housing, and balance, but also, when we talk about equity, right, and making sure that there's the jobs for, kind of the developing communities that we have here up in the North County, that, having some economic opportunities for people who live here to have high-paying jobs, I think is going to be really important. So to those ends, I like to see us be focusing on those things whenever possible.
And I'd just like to highlight on the economic development front, I think it's not that we don't have anything. Perhaps within the direct purview of SBCAG that we're more a transportation agency, but we have developed a really nice relationship with REACH, and we've worked with them a lot, and perhaps that's that relationship is the tool that we can continue to capitalize on to promote economic development.
Well, I think REACH is a part of it, but I think there's other opportunities that are outside of REACH. We just had a conversation at the board about trying to do more within our agricultural community on processing and what that could do for potential job opportunities here too. So, we're always looking for more here in our community. So thank you.
Director Osborne?
Yeah, so when I see the respondents and so much of it was out of South County, I remember that nearly 12,000 of my community commute out every day. And so they likely didn't participate because they were busy either commuting or working. And while they're living in my community, us not making sure we have major projects on a list, to pass Measure A again, and then secondly, to create those high-paying jobs in my community so they no longer have to commute, rather than creating housing south so they leave my community and live where they're commuting to. So again, I think for long-term health, we need to be motivated to pass Measure A again and extend it. We need to have those major projects that create the economic development in the communities where we're already living. So if that infrastructure isn't healthy, I have many businesses say, we won't relocate to you because we have to drive, and we have to drive on roads that we're not happy driving on. So yes, adding potential bridges, adding potential throughways. And then we have the military base that is expanding, and we have businesses coming that are building in my community and going to deliver those jobs, but getting the supplies there, getting the ability to deliver the parts, to deliver the equipment, all will be impacted if we don't have investment in major projects. And that money not existing, my community can't do it anyway. My community needs that Measure A fund, not just for the maintenance of existing infrastructure, but those road projects in North County, whether it's between myself and Buellton and Solvang or going to Santa Maria. So again, I know it sounds like, doing the same thing, but that transit-oriented infill development, I'd rather see that continue as a way to motivate and get my community to support Measure A continuing.
Director Patino?
I'm not going to repeat what is. You turned me off.
Let's just move forward with the comment.
Got it.
Or we get in trouble.
Got it. I stayed up too late last night. We talk about the housing and jobs imbalance, and in Santa Maria, we're planning in our general plan amendment for 30,000 more people. We're going to have a couple of new high schools, 8, maybe 10 elementary schools, and we're going to need more funding for all these major projects. We just are. It's reality. It's not necessarily what people think we should have in Sacramento. It's what the reality of life is in North County. And obviously, North County is different than South County, but I think this is the reality that we have to deal with. This is what we hear from the residents in our community. Thank you.
Director Hartman?
I wouldn't argue against the importance of signature projects for winning voter support. But I would say that the purpose of this is sustainability, greenhouse gas reduction, and I think losing track of alternative transportation, active transportation, would be a really big mistake. We have invested far more in South County because of that receptivity, and so local trips to school, to shopping, to libraries and other destinations is so much safer, so much easier. You look to a city like Santa Maria, the 3rd highest bike accident rate in the state. It's not designed for that. So the result is people have no choice, even for short trips. That could save a lot of GHG emissions. You have to get in a car. That's the same in the Santa Ynez Valley. So I prefer the hybrid as opposed to just straight alternatives B or 2 or whatever it is.
So again, just to clarify, this is, we're trying to look at 2040. This is post 2040, between 2040 and 2050.
Yes.
All right. Supervisor Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lavenu. And one other, thought I had about this, and I think that this is good. beyond the greenhouse gases, right? This is good planning that we're kind of trying to figure out what this would look like, and because I think what these plans also ignore is the electric vehicle mandates that are happening at the state level, right? Because that's not taken into any of this consideration, right? By 2040, there won't be so.
2035, yeah, all new vehicles, yeah.
Well, I mean, but as far as these options are concerned, so I mean, there might be other planning reasons to push transit and pedestrian use, but I mean, as far as using greenhouse gases as the reason for doing that, in theory, that should be less and less of an issue as some of these other mandates, and that's absent to these calculations, right? There's no calculations for electric vehicle adoption in the way that we're doing this.
So, yeah, it's complicated, but yeah, this is certainly kind of one of my arguments is as the state's trying to extend this out further, yeah, we're going to come to a point where 80-90% of the fleet is electric. And Senate Bill 375 is explicit to greenhouse gases. It's not, it doesn't say vehicle miles traveled. So it's, if you're already drastically reducing greenhouse gases through electrification of the fleet, how do we continue to do it through Senate Bill 375, which is not focused on VMT, but in reality, there's a nexus between vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. So at some point, it's no longer going to work.
Yeah, because VMT will no longer be as relevant.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's good for planning because we want people to be in their communities and work where they live, and I mean that's a better quality of life. And I think so. From that purpose, I support the VMT argument. But is it a driver just because of I think there's other solutions that we're probably heading towards in the state that we're probably going to solve these problems way before we do with a pure housing job balance. So
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Director Julian?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the North County side of things. We have, in Guadalupe, we're going to probably get to about 12,000. We're about 8,500 now. Most of our jobs have, probably 90% of the jobs in Guadalupe go to Santa Maria. Right now, people actually go from Guadalupe to Division to Napomo to get to Santa Maria. On Betaravia, which is a big congested area, you can't go through there at 3:30 in the afternoon because of the congestion there. But we need to keep some major projects on the books somewhere. So,
okay.
Thank you.
South County. Not hearing anybody down there?
Yeah, Director.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm happy.
It's a little hard to get a word in edgewise. That's right, Director Rouse. So
pays to be the chair. All right, what do we got?
Well,
Director Rouse.
I'm struggling with any of the models that fit both North and South County. They're so radically different in their needs. In the South County, especially here in the city of Santa Barbara, using the RENA numbers to mitigate greenhouse gases sounds great in theory, but we're facing headwinds to comply with those RENA numbers that are beyond the government control. I mean, we have projects in the winds and whatnot, but as soon as interest rates clipped up a couple of points, boom, a lot of those projects shut down. And we're going to struggle as a largely built-out city to do all that. I would love to see regional transit and the lane and train, the multimodal things. I think that's the kind of way that the people who live and work in Santa Barbara that work in Santa Barbara that don't live here are going to be able to come here. We can try to build out all day long. The idea that we're going to satisfy this RENA number by the due date, I think, is highly speculative, and I'm not sure just how many dense projects. Strictly rental projects are going to satisfy the future workforce. I don't know if that's going to be something everybody's going to choose. So I would love to see a hybrid that's different than what we have, because what you've got going in Santa Maria is a projected growth of 20, 30, 40,000 people. Santa Barbara's been flat for a long time in the city as far as this growth goes. And you could argue, well, that's, the jobs are there, people driving in. I don't know that we're going to fix that to the significant degree that's going to satisfy what the model says that the RENA numbers are going to fix the greenhouse gas production. So I would love to see us focus, at least in the short term, on the van pool, on the light rail, on the multimodal once you get to the central stations. I think that is going to serve Santa Barbarans and the greenhouse gas emission numbers far more quickly, far more readily, and probably with a greater degree of certainty than the RENA formula will.
Mr. Chair.
Whatever the director down there would like to speak, go ahead.
Well, I'll sort of echo my comments in support of Supervisor Hartman's. You know, I would instinctively approach the option 3, the alternative transportation emphasis, given that it was a recommendation from JTAC, and given that, you know, as someone who represents folks in the north too, I increasingly get, you know, one of the biggest requests that I get that's the same in communities as different in income as Montecito and Kiama is the opportunity to actually walk somewhere that's close by. And even people being able to get from the high school to the township in Kiama has been kind of a weird thing over time. So I just don't, I think ultimately this is, should be an all of above strategy. And I've been thinking of supporting a hybrid in order to meet the needs that you have expressed at the North County Subregional. But I think we would be better moving together as an organization. Our director, executive director at the North County Subregional, I believe, said when asked what would be her ultimate recommendation, it would be a hybrid. So staff is prepared to prepare a hybrid. I think it's better for us to move forward with an all of the above strategy like that as a hybrid, and make sure that there's a balance of funding that makes sure that some of these signature projects get done, but that we're also adequately paying attention to the ways that we can improve quality of life in both the north and the south through safe route to school and other options.
Chair, this is Perotti.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. You know, I struggled with this because, of course, my background is always supporting alternative transportation and pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. And I think we've done a fantastic job in the city of in Santa Barbara County. And I think one of the, being a stakeholder on Measure A meetings, because of safe route to school, I think the one reason that really helped Measure A pass, I think the voters were really pleased to see that there was especially in South County, 2 line items in the budget for Measure A. One was for safe routes to school, and one was pedestrian and bicycle safety. So I'm struggling, and I hear what Santa Maria is saying. Definitely, North County. I'm struggling with looking at only at. I personally like option 3, but I'm open to a hybrid of some sort. I'd like to see what that would look like. I don't know if we're prepared to do that today or how that would come about. But that's where it's my position.
Okay, Director Nelson.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I think what is being proposed is option A, the transit-oriented infill development, is a hybrid of business as usual versus a 0 number.
That's actually
right. And so, I'm curious if we're saying hybrid, is it from between that option and the 0, another option,
and
so
yeah. So, if whoever's doing the slides, if you could put up the slide deck. There we go. Yeah, so it would be something along the bottom line. So you could essentially, we could have put a blank row there and said fill the numbers in, which would be the hybrid. So, like for instance, if we currently do 58% of maintenance, we could leave that alone. But we heard that the bike ped programs should be upped. We could say, well, let's take 3% off of the name projects. But again, this is
we're cooking a pie we're not taking out of the oven for another 30 years.
And there's
so
going to be many more times. It's kind of
Also based
opening
on 230 respondents.
right.
I mean, that has me concerned when 70% of it is South County and it's only 230 respondents. I think maybe moving some of the needle on some of those percentages is fine as a way going forward, but the transit-oriented infill development is already a hybrid.
And my argument is that, look, it doesn't seem broken at this point, and we're talking about something from 2040 to 2050. I'm good with status quo, but I think this has brought up and it might sound weird coming from me, but so in this North County, South County, I hope South County directors have kind of figured out that that there is a pent-up need in the North County that we're looking at. This is the first toe in the water of looking out at the end of Measure A. And obviously, we don't want to go back to the north versus south, demeanor on the board. But I hope everybody in South County understands that North County is looking at the end of the 101 and all the ancillary projects that we all supported, and we've been driving through and looking at all these gorgeous overpasses and roundabouts that we're going to these ribbon cuttings of, and we love it. It's great. But we're also saying, hey, man, it's our turn. So we definitely there's no way we're passing Son of Measure A without named projects. The only thing that everybody can hold us accountable to is just going down that checklist. And so however we manipulate these percentages for 15, 20 years from now that have so many things like you talked about that we haven't discussed. This is just a long-term planning document. But if you feel the burn up here, it's because it's real, it's palpable, and while we supported all these projects and we love them, there is pent-up desire on our constituents end that we have also crumbling infrastructure. And we invested $1 billion in South County, and we're going to have to move that up here. So we could probably sit here and manipulate these numbers all day, but if somebody would motion something.
There's public comment.
Oh, there is public comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah, and I'm not going to. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to belabor this much more, but I'm very respectful of what people in South County need, and maybe we can make it figure out so that our needs are met here, their needs are met there. But I'm not talking about 2 or 3%. I'm talking more in like 22, 23% up in North County. Because like I said, that's where the growth is going to happen. That's what we need. And it's not just what we want, it's what we really need.
Okay, public comment we have. Yes, I'm sorry, Director King first, then we'll go to public comment.
Yes, Director Laguanino, or Chair. We had this conversation in our North County meeting, and I kind of like the idea of going with status quo and B, because of all the concerns that we've heard up here on the dais of all these projects that may or may not go through. If we switch to C, then it's going to be more difficult for local control of some of these projects. And so I think that when we were presented that during the North County meeting of status quo, I really liked that scenario.
Okay, let's go to public comment.
Chair, we have Lori Tamora.
I hope I'm not the only member of the public that is going to speak on such an amazingly important project. Did participate in the public forum last week or just recently, and some of the frustration I had was, first of all, a lot of percentages were discussed, but there were no solid numbers. We're talking by 2050 between 80 and 120,000 more people in the county of Santa Barbara, distributed among all of these different regions, mostly in the North County. Also, we are talking probably around 30,000 jobs, and where are those going to go in order to sustain those that population? All of the scenarios, I believe, going forward should be a 50-50 split on jobs. we're trying to encourage the North County to have employment in the North County. And if you continue to have this perception that everybody's driving to Santa Barbara, we're just perpetuating the same perception. Our effort with REACH, with Vandenberg Space Force Base, with infill development and employment, high-tech agriculture, all of those things are saying jobs in the North County. That should be the theme, because that reduces VMT, that reduces GHG, and that makes a higher quality of life for those that now do not have to commute. So my recommendation is all of these scenarios should say 50-50 job split between North and South. That's our goal. And also, I love the point made about greenhouse gas and electric vehicles, because if the state's dictating one thing and then they're telling us to do something else, and we're not including the dictate of having electric vehicles, then this report is almost at odds with itself and what the state is dictating to us. Everyone's encouraging electric vehicles. Then the goal should be more EV stations being one of the high priorities in this. I think that the hybrid should be also expanded to include at least acknowledgement that there will be expansion of some of these cities, annexations, and so every reference to transit-oriented infill development puts out a message that that's not going to happen, and it is going to happen. Some annexations will occur, and so I think that they need to be tied to VMT, they need to be tied to all of this other stuff, but it needs to be done. Lastly, I think it was said several times here, the first time Measure A went to an election, it failed.
Yeah.
And this time now, it needs to have those named projects for the future. I have a lot to say, but I got my 3 minutes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, I'll bring it back for discussion and deliberation. Director Nelson?
Well, I was actually going to make a motion.
Okay.
If that's.
Let's try it.
If there's no further discussion, I was going to make a motion that we adopt option B, the transit-oriented and infill development. Number two, yeah.
I'll second that.
Further discussion?
I'll just
Santa
say-
Barbara, speak up.
I'll just
Yep.
say I'm disappointed and will be voting against the motion. I mean, I just think that while we definitely need to do named projects, this option 2 is not a hybrid approach. It is essentially the least on alternatives that we can do without being non-compliant with the state law. And that's not a hybrid. A hybrid would be to try to strike a balance between option 2 and 3. And so I'm just disappointed that we're not trying to do that, and we'll be voting no.
All right.
Could we put them up on the screen?
Yeah, why don't we get them up on there? And I guess we do need to make that clear to the public as well, that option B meets the state requirements.
Yes.
Okay,
We will satisfy the greenhouse gas reduction.
okay.
You're talking item, option 2, or?
It would be option 2.
Okay,
It's the current,
okay.
ever
The
since
better screen
2013.
is the one where you have the
The three.
columns.
Andrew,
Yeah.
can you go back to,
Yeah,
there you go.
that one.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Williams to take menu item middle, I guess?
No, Nelson.
Nelson. What did I say?
Was yes, the middle.
Williams. Oh, sorry about that.
Middle column.
Us. And your mic's off, sorry.
Okay. Road improvement.
Okay, motion by Nelson for, if we could leave those up while people are voting,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Option 2. Is there a second for option 2? Director King. Okay, let's do a roll call.
Okay, let's go. Director Williams.
No.
Capps.
No.
Hartman.
No.
Nelson.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye.
Infante.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Perotti,
No.
Clark,
No.
Rouse,
Aye.
and Chair Labanino.
Oh, thanks, Randy. Aye. Okay.
Motion
Aye.
passes 8-5.
Aye. Aye. 8-5. Okay. Okay. And we'll see how that works out in 2040. Move to item 5, Director's Report.
Yes,
Director Kern?
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board. On behalf of SBCAG, I extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of the teenager who was tragically died yesterday involving an Amtrak train going south. The loss of a young life is always tragic and heart-wrenching. It serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of vigilance and situational awareness for pedestrians and safety near the train tracks. We understand that grief counselors were called to the scene following yesterday's tragedy to provide support to the families. SBCAG remains committed to working with Lausanne Rail Agency and the Union Pacific Railroad and other local officials to enhance safety measures in the corridor. A report detailing safety and security measures along the rail lines is anticipated for the Lausanne's upcoming board meeting. So if anybody's interested in that, we can share that information. So moving on, the region, we recently had, the state had the deadline for the active transportation projects statewide. And our member agencies and tribal partners submitted $59 million in requests for active transportation cycle 7. And it offers an estimated, this cycle offers an estimated $568 million in funding from federal and state SB1 funding, as well as the state highway account sources. And so the projects include 2 from the city of Santa Barbara, 1 for the Lower East Side community connectivity, and the other project was the Castillo Street undercrossing project and pedestrian facility improvements. And the other third project is the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians submitted the environmental and design funding request for the Santa Ynez Valley Community Connector in partnership with the County of Santa Barbara, City of Buellton, and City of Solvang. So we anticipate, in the past, we advocated for keeping the active transportation plan program funding in the budget, and it looks like that was successful. So hopefully that these projects will receive favorable funding moving forward. So but the governor still has until June 30th to sign the state budget, so we're still in a limbo there. I did want to let the board know that the Highway 166 and Black Road projects will start July 1st. The Black Road closure will tentatively start on July 8th. We did do some outreach to the communities again because it's been a while since we talked to them, and we sent out postcards to the neighborhoods in the vicinity around the project. So that will be a 100-day contract duration, and so it should be finished by the end of the calendar year. And then I'm not going to steal the thunder of Caltrans. I'm planting a seed that they're going to talk about the project that they announced at the subregionals about Fox and Canyon Road. So I'm not going to do that. But if that doesn't happen, I can handle that if you want to come back to me if that is not addressed. But directors might bring that up as well. So with that, that's my report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Item 7, Caltrans District Director's Report. Scott?
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Scott Eads here, District Director with Caltrans. A few items. First, I wanted to just highlight the fact that the southbound Gaviota roadside rest is open again. So thank you all for your patience. That was extended. The closure was extended for a period of time due to emergency project work that was happening for a retaining wall along Gaviota Creek. So happy to have that back open. And then also just wanted to acknowledge work is continuing on the 101 at the San Jose Creek Bridge in Goleta. The replacement of the northbound bridge is now complete, which is great news. So we will be transitioning southbound traffic over onto that bridge and then ultimately reconstructing the southbound bridge as well. And we're looking at having the project complete in summer of 2025. So work continues. We're still a ways away, but an important milestone in getting that northbound bridge constructed. And then, as noted by the executive director, Mark Kern, we have been able to advance some work on 154 and Fox and Canyon Road. It's been a subject of some consideration. We had some community meetings where we were looking at some incidents that have continued to occur at that location. And so we've been conducting and recently concluded a safety investigation at that at Fox and Canyon Road. We also had some public engagement meetings specifically to talk about strategies and things that were being considered there. So we ended up with a two-phase strategy. The first is some near-term improvements where we'll be installing flashing beacons with advanced intersection warning signs at the approaches on 154, the approaches to Fox and Canyon Road and Grand Avenue, both of those intersections. And it's been approved. The funding has been approved for us to be able to do that. And then construction is anticipated to occur this fall or early 2025. And then meanwhile, we're also working on a long-term strategy, which is to install a roundabout at 154 and Fox and Canyon Road. We have been able to secure safety funding for that project. We're beginning the project development work. It's already underway, and we're beginning work on a PID on that project initiation document, and we're targeting construction of summer 2028. And both of those strategies, I'll mention, are aligned with what we heard from the public when we did engage with the public on different options. And so both of those seem to be in a good standing in terms of what the public input was. And then our last thing that I wanted to highlight actually is for those of you that are aware, the Lompoc Flower Festival is happening on June 22nd. There will be closures on Highway 1. And so we've worked with the city to process an encroachment permit. And so it'll be closed between Ocean Avenue and North Avenue, and between Ocean and F and R, I believe, from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. And there will be a tour available and closure signs to direct travelers. That concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Director Hartman.
Oh, well, I just had to say, people think of Caltrans as kind of an inscrutable bureaucracy, but it moved at the speed of light on this, and many of us here are on the 154 Safety Committee and attended the meeting where we heard really heartfelt community testimony about their experiences on that stretch of road in Los Olivos. And I just can't thank Director Eads and all the people who worked on this enough, because you heard the community, you were really responsive. I think this is happening much faster than people thought, and it's just kudos to you. I can't really express how important this is to that community.
Thank you.
Always good. Director Patino.
Yes, I just want to thank Caltrans for the beautification project we have on 135 in Cook and 135 in Broadway. It looks wonderful. And there's always people who are going to that have criticized the city because we're spending too much money on a crosswalk. So I blame that on Caltrans too. So, but thank you again, Scott. Appreciate it.
It is beautiful. I drove over it a couple times. Yes, Director King.
Yeah, Scott, I have one question for you. I know even though it's in the county, barring any further delays, southbound 101 at the tunnels, do you have an estimated time of completion for that?
I don't in front of me right now, but I can follow up with you on that, Director King.
Thank you, sir.
Anything from Santa Barbara? Okay. Thank you very much, Scott. That takes us to item 8, which is our committee meetings. And I see that Director Nelson has stepped away, and I believe Director Williams has also stepped away. Whoa, maybe they went out in the back. They got to figure out 2040 in the alley. All right. So that takes us to 1-minute reports. Anybody in? Let's start in Santa Barbara. Anybody in Santa Barbara have a 1-minute report they'd like to discuss? Seeing none. Anybody here? Director Osborne.
We have our Flower Festival parade, as you heard from Caltrans, and so be aware if you come into the city on Saturday, that's why the roads are blocked, but we welcome everybody to come over and enjoy a wonderful weekend and have a lot of fun at our Flower Festival that starts today and runs through Sunday.
Excellent. Director Hartman.
Oh, I just have to add, I just got a message. I've got a killer hat that I'm going to wear.
There, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So come, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Director Julian.
Yes, I just wanted to thank SBCAG for being at our next council meeting to update the Black Road transition. So thank you, staff, for that.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Oh, Director King.
And we will be having, and I'll say it for Solvang, we'll be having the 4th of July parade on the 4th of July at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I hope everybody comes out to that.
Excellent. And Director Infante.
And following that in the evening with music,
big giant
and
fireworks
food
show.
and a fireworks show that's not to be believed if you haven't seen it before.
And I wouldn't have
quite
believed it,
amazing.
except I saw it last year. It was amazing.
Well, I'll mention our fireworks show. It's going to be
No, yours doesn't count.
a drone.
Everybody in Santa Maria has to watch the one in
A
Solvang.
drone show, but starts around 9 o'clock at night
And Drone
at
Alice?
Elks Field. Yes.
Excellent.
We saw sort of a preview at the last council meeting. It looks really exciting.
Cool.
And illegal fireworks are illegal
Yes.
in Santa Maria. Thank you.
All right.
Even though Lompoc has fireworks, illegal are still illegal, yes.
Yes. So with that, we are going to adjourn to our next meeting. It's going to be July 18th, 2024. Hey.